We're happy to be back for our Monday.
You have a Monday morning smooth jazz voice going on, Mark.
Thank you.
Smooth jazz Monday mornings with Mark Clark and the TM 101 gang.
Change chat settings. Wait for everyone to get in here and then we can get this party started. Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Hi.
There you are.
Hey, everybody. All right. Are we missing anyone?
I don't believe we are. Just MJ, who's off for the day. She won't be joining us on camera, but she's going to attend in another way.
Yeah, I can. Looks like we're ready to rock. I can get this episode started. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of TM 101. We're continuing our Spotlight on series on building a writer today. This will be the part one series where we'll give you kind of the breakdown of everything, and then we'll move into advanced soon. If you've yet to change your chat settings, please make sure to change it to all panelists and attendees. That helps us address questions and follow along the chat. If you've yet to join us on our YouTube channel, please make sure to like and subscribe and follow us there for all things TM101. And that's from starting at the first episode all the way to where we are today. We're going to introduce a fun new thing that we'd like to add called Quick Tip of the Day. I'm going to pass it over to Henry. We've got a nice recording from MJ that we're going to play today. And that's our quick tip of the day.
Oh, sorry. You guys see that?
We see it.
Dude,
We need audio. It lacks audio. Henry?
Yeah?
It lacks audio.
Yeah, I'm not hearing anything from it.
Oh, I'm
No
sorry.
audio. No audio. You have to share audio as well.
Little technical difficulties.
Oh, share sound. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I got this. Stand by. Here we go.
Go for you. No bueno.
Oh.
Aw.
This is annoying.
We have technical difficulties.
Well,
shall we skip it for a second while I figure this out? I'd love to come back to this.
Yeah, let's
great
fire
section that we're adding to the show.
Let's fire it up. You work that out, and let's fire it up again towards the end because we're going to get to it whether we have to endeavor harder or not.
a fun new thing we're adding for y'all.
And we're
the
doing
quick tip of the day is coming soon.
Yeah. Today.
This is the challenge of going live, people.
Yeah. Now you know how live we actually are. And go back to Henry.
All right. Well, then it's coming back to me. So welcome to Building a Writer. The writer is a mystical document that many people hear about, but few actually get to see. It's the wish list, the must-have list, the technical schematics, and the frequently asked questions page all in one. I like to say it's the manual for how this particular show is done, but the end goal of the writer is to be able to share this document with the promoter on the other end. They read it and only have one question for you. What time can I expect you? That doesn't always happen that way, but how you go about cramming all that information into one document is a daunting task that will make anyone's head explode, but it doesn't have to be. So today we're going to get into what makes up a writer and how to make one for your next tour. To do that, let's check in with my friend north of the border, Doug Wilson. Doug?
Thank you, Henry. Yeah, and that was a great intro. A writer, as we said in our copy on social media, it's kind of a mythical beast, and it's been exaggerated and parodied and everything else in the media for many years. And often I find that people, when they clasp their eyes on the first surprised, maybe even disappointed by how unexciting they are.
How
So
lacking
there
of
are two
goats heads
parts.
and lacking of goats heads and green M&Ms in reality they really are.
Right. Yeah. And for anyone who hasn't seen any of those articles, I once saw a article in a major newspaper in the UK, a newspaper that should have known better, saying the excessive rider of X festival headlining band. And, you know, amongst the crazy requests they put on the rider were 96 towels. Why would a band ever need 96 towels? Well, if you've got 50, 60, 70, 80 people on your crew, you're going to need some towels for them. It's a pretty standard request. So, you know, without the context of the needs of a small, medium, or large production, a rider in and of itself might seem excessive, but when you factor in what we actually need to make a show happen within a time period, those requests start to look a lot more reasonable. So an artist's, there are two parts to an artist's live performance contract. The terms of the agreement, which spell out the date, the time, and the length of the performance, the amount of monetary compensation and what the deal is, and the writer. So the writer does form a part of the live contract. The writer includes all the specifications that the buyer, who is the promoter in most situations, the local promoter or venue or festival buyer, all the specifications, technical, non-technical, hospitality, security, etc., that they need to know to facilitate the artist's performance. And a standard writer, you know, they typically fall into a production writer and a catering / hospitality writer. So you can kind of break them up into those two parts with many, many, many subsections within those. And, you know, the complexity of your writer really depends on the complexity of your show, the size of your tour party, what you're carrying in terms of production, excuse me. And so, you know, today we're really focusing on club and theater writers, where maybe you'll be out on your first tour doing small clubs and your writer may be a several page document. Now we are going to revisit this subject in a more advanced scope and take a look at writers on arena tours, shed tours, festivals, stadiums, things of that nature, where, you know, you may have several writers broken out per department, and they're going to be incredibly detailed because at that level, every second, minute counts. So if you roll in and something isn't perfect, then, you know, your whole day is thrown out of whack. But let's frame this in terms of your first tour right up to theater touring. So we're covering the gamut of sprinter tours, small clubs, maybe a one bus and trailer tour, maybe multi-bus, multi-truck theater touring. So there's quite a spectrum in here. But, you know, you still have to be very thorough in your writer and communicate the needs of your artist and your team. And something that we talked about yesterday internally when we were prepping this is, and it's something we've kind of come back to time and time again, as a tour manager, your job is to manage the tour. You kind of need to have a working understanding of each department, but you don't need to be a tech. You need to glean the perfect information that you need from your tech to be able to transmit that information to a promoter. And, you know, I think by asking questions when you're advancing of your own team. What do you need? Please spell it out for me in the most base level terms so I can communicate that in advance. Nobody is going to look at you as if you're stupid if you're asking dumb questions at that point, but they are going to look at you as if you're stupid if you turn up on the day and their power is not there, or the writer is wrong, or X, Y, and Z. So it's really important that you get your information out, connect with your team, and transmit that in the form of the writer in as concise a manner as is possible. Now, writers aren't meant to make the promoter's life difficult. Quite the opposite. Writers they're meant to help the show go as smoothly as possible by spelling out all the things that you need to make the day a success. So you're not going to war with the promoter over your writer. You're not putting goats' heads on there for no reason. You're not trying to extract as much as you can from the promoter. You're just trying to get everything that you need to make your show happen. And you better be able to justify why you need those things. Otherwise, you're going to go in and make yourself look like you're just trying to grab as much as you can. So, the writer is there to communicate to the local promoter who may not have ever seen the band perform before what the tour needs, both on and off the stage. So that goes without saying, but, and this is something that I can really speak to personally. I've done a lot of work with Canadian artists who perhaps might tour at arena level up here in Canada, across the border, and doing small clubs. Now that's an incredibly challenging tour to advance, to approach, and you have to completely not only reconfigure your setup, you have to reconfigure your mindset in approaching those shows, because that local promoter in St. Louis, Missouri, who you sold 300 tickets with, doesn't care that you could sell 12,000 in Toronto or Vancouver. They care about the 300 tickets you've sold in St. Louis, Missouri. So if you come in there with a catering writer that's $2,000, you're going to get laughed out of town. You have to communicate with the promoter and work with them within the bounds of that show and how that show has been budgeted and in that market. It doesn't matter what you do elsewhere. It matters about that show there and then. And final point on that, writers should always be as current as possible so that they reflect exactly what the band needs at all times to make for a smooth show. So this one's really important. You may have had a previous production element or crew member with a dietary restriction or whatever else it is. If that's not current, then you're wasting money. Maybe you have catering for a show and they went to the extra expense of having an option for a celiac, but you no longer have a celiac in your crew. That's money down the drain potentially. You spec 3 risers when you only need 1, or any number of different production, non-production elements that may incur a cost, and your writer is not up to date, then that's gonna be a problem. So make sure that your writer is up to date. It's not one document that you write once and that's it. It's something you are constantly updating, and it's something that you may have several versions of, leg to leg within the tour, or per different segment. So that's kind of an intro to what a writer is and what it does. I'm going to pass over to Mark.
Hey, before we jump, I just wanted to mention a really great point, or amplify just a really great point that Doug mentioned in his commentary. And that is, not everyone has seen every band. And what this made me think of was back in the days when I was a club promoter. Does anybody remember GWAR?
Yeah.
Okay. So for those of you who may not know who GWAR is, they are literally a horror show metal band. And when you open up the rider, they're looking for tonnage of visqueen. And you don't really understand, but when I tell you that we had to cover, they spew stuff. There's liquids that come from the stage in this crazy horror show, and we literally have had to cover lighting and the dance floor and every single thing in your club that you don't want sprayed with some weird horror show goo. So yes, don't assume people know what you're coming in with. And if you have things like, if you're doing crazy gags, even at the club level, because it happens, everybody starts out in a club. I have done some epic club shows, by the way. We were the first place where Marilyn Manson and the Genitorturers ever did a double header. So promise, riders are important at every level. End discussion.
Absolutely. Let's talk basics of building a rider. Let's just say you got your first tour and you need to build a rider for a band. It can be really overwhelming knowing where to start. You want to really start from square one. If the band has toured before, ask management or the agent if there's an existing rider that you can base new rider on. The information may not be current, but at least it will give you an idea of what questions to ask and jumping off point. I'll always make a point to touch base with management or my agent just to kind of see where we stand, get deal memos, build a rider out that really works for what you have in place. Your deal structures is going to save you a lot of time and headache and redlined riders and all of these things. Make sure that you are kind of doing the homework to build something that works for where you are within the tour. You could be support or you could be the main act. Those points are going to help you along the way. Also, ask other people for their templates. This is one reason it's important to have a good network. None of us have ever written a rider from scratch. I mean, I'll even say for myself, my rider is a mixed bag of a lot of great ideas that I was like, oh, that makes things a lot easier and a lot better for the flow of my rider. So don't be afraid to reach out to your network and see how they're doing it. You know, it might help you out in the long run. And I know that all my colleagues can agree here that they've kind of done a mix of a little bit of everything. We are inspired by looking at a bunch of other riders and templates. Take the best bits from everything you see and create your own.
Totally. When I started out, we were talking yesterday about, like, when I started out, I got my hands on some writers that look like legal documents. It looked like they were written by lawyers for lawyers and used terminology that was way too confusing. And so I would cut and paste out of that and Frankenstein it, and then, but it wouldn't make any sense at all. I think I made the advance harder for myself, because then the promoter was like, what is this? It doesn't make any sense, dude. And then realizing that, like, after getting a few other writers, what we're getting into today is really to simplify it. It's just straight point blank information. You can do it in bullet form, short paragraph sentences. And but yeah, I think we made a joke that there's really only 4 original writers in this business, and they have spawned and been cut and pasted into thousands maybe at this point.
Yeah, I like the term Frankenrider was a good one yesterday. Just stitching and putting all of these ideas into one perfect rider that works for us. When you go in to build your rider, build the rider while you're building your tour. We touched on the elements you need to think about when you build your tour way back in episode 2. But you want to consider things like, how is the band set up on stage? How much gear are you bringing? Are you carrying any kind of production, lights, audio, etc.? Are you traveling? Are you on a bus, a van? What size venues are you playing in? And what does the band like to eat? Are there any dietary restrictions? All of these points are super important. And as we continue on, I'm going to pass it over to Jim to talk about a club tour rider example, step by step.
All right. I'm going to attempt my first screen share. So let's see.
Hopefully it goes better than mine.
That working?
No.
All right, so we're going to start here with looking at a production rider.
We don't see it, Jim.
Okay, can somebody share that while I go through it? Can one of you guys share that? You got that handy?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Thanks, Henry.
Stand by.
So this is a basic club rider. We're looking at basically 500 to 1,000 people. Like Doug kind of touched base at, this is basically your blueprint for your advance. This is the first kind of thing your promoter is going to see to start the conversation via phone, via emails of what you need for the day. Some things might change, but this is just where you're going to start, and then you're going to just advance it from there. The first thing we look at is contacts. Now this can go, some people put managers, some people put everybody in their entourage that needs to talk to somebody. I like to keep it simple. I like to control the communication. So in this case, we have the tour manager contact. The tour manager then can pass, or if there's a production manager, we can have both of them on there because they both advance different parts of it. But basically, even if my audio guys need to, because I'm not an audio guy and I don't, have a production manager, I'm going to control that communication with me. They're going to contact me. I'm going to pass that information on to my audio guy. That way I know the conversation is happening or is going to happen.
Yeah, I would also say that if you are going to put management contact on there, okay with them first, because they don't want unsolicited things coming their way.
Yeah, and I wouldn't recommend doing that anyways. If anybody needs, they're going to have the manager, or they can come to you for it. So I wouldn't recommend doing that. I just see it on some riders, but I think keeping it simple is the best way to do it. Now, timings, sound check, noise restrictions, these are just basically, you want to start the conversation. You don't want to have any surprises. You want to let them know that you're expecting to do a sound check, what you expect when that you expect only working personnel to be in the building, because that can be important sometimes. You want to start the conversation on your timings, what time you're going to load in, what time you're going to be there, etc. Noise restrictions is an important one because sometimes you can't make a lot of noise. You can basically, do a line check, but not do a sound check into a certain time. Sometimes there's businesses that are attached to, especially in the club world. Yeah, that you're not able to make any noise till after 5 p.m. So you got to push everything accordingly. And there's no, there's no give on that. Generally, it's like, this is the way it's been. A lot of places you play, that's been the way it is. Like the Ryman, which has been doing shows, you don't have a noise restriction, but they're doing tours until 4 or 5 p.m. You can't do anything until those people are out of the building. So
yeah, and I was going to say, just to add to that, Jim, like, you're going to look like a fool if you try to demand a 3 p.m. sound check in a place that has, everyone knows this is when their sound checks start. Right. That's the way it is at that house. Just,
or even worse, that you have your band is there ready to sound check, and you forgot to advance or forgot to tell them there was a noise restriction, and they're not allowed to make any noise for another 2 hours, and they're sitting there waiting in the dressing room ready to go. There's nothing worse than that.
I would also like to add is to do your due diligence with your agent when you're coming across situations like that, because I've seen that conflict with our kind of generated show run that we've had across the board, and maybe the venue didn't relay or the promoter side didn't relay that, and then now this is conflicting with our entire show and how it works. So always try to keep that into account. It's an important one.
Yeah, and then we have vehicle parking, which is an important one, and MJ brought this up yesterday. Due to new DOT rules, you can't be moving drivers, and if we have to have a driver to come in, also too, it costs money. If we have to have a driver come in the middle of the afternoon after not getting his 10 hours off, and he's got to move the bus, that's going to cost you money. That's all stuff you have to know. So it's vitally important that especially in Europe, but even becoming more so in the US, that once the bus is parked, that bus sits there, it doesn't move. And that you got to advance the parking and making sure, and if that's an issue, working out ways to deal with that's something you need to know right away. So basically making that note that the bus stays where it stays from when you arrive to when you leave is super important. And same thing goes at the end of the night, making sure that the bus can stay there until you're ready to go to get to the next place and not having to leave with an hour after the shows. You need to really be aware of that. So that's a conversation, which is why it's in the rider that you want to have right away. The promoter rep is going to look at that and go, oh, there's a problem here. I'm going to call them right away and make sure that they're aware of that. Next, we have stage, barricades, and risers. It's just, I mean, obviously, if you're going into a venue and this one is saying you need 20 by 16. If you go in and the stage is a lot smaller than that, either somebody didn't advance and they decided to do it anyways, or hopefully your promoter had, like Mark had said, the promoter called or your agent has called you and said, hey, we want to do this show. We can work, but the stage is small. Can you make this fit? Because if you're expecting 40 feet of width, chances are you're not going to be able to change that in this venue. So either the show works or it doesn't. And you need to know that. In fact, there's nothing. So basically, that's another thing that the promoter rep's going to look at and go, we only got 12 feet. Is this going to be a problem? And you can work on that right away and see if there's a solution to that. Same thing goes with barricades.
Hey, Jim.
What's that?
Jim, real quick. I'm sorry, you were just getting to barricades, but I'm sorry to butt in. I just wanted to add that going back to the point of knowing your show and the promoter not necessarily knowing your show, especially at a club level. And I know this from experience because it's something that I would do differently of an experience I had when I was early in my career. You need to know what your show's like, and that goes to crowd safety, demographic, and all sorts. And it doesn't matter what size of venue you're going into. If you need a mojo barrier because your crowd is rowdy, you need a mojo barrier, even if you get pushback. Because I had a show early on, rowdy crowd, promoter said no on the mojo barrier, put up bike rack, and my guitar tech spent the whole show fishing kids out, nearly crushed under a barrier. It was deeply unpleasant, but it could have been a lot worse. And, crowd safety is really important, even in small clubs where they may say there's no budget for it. So I just wanted to add that on to what you're saying.
Yeah, I was just going to add what Adrian said, very sure, like with guar, like what you need for guar versus what you need for a singer-songwriter is going to be very different. So having that in your notes of like, you need mojo barrier, it needs to be, in this case, saying you need it close to the stage. That's also important. That means if it's going to be close to the stage, more than likely you're not having security in that position. And that's a conversation you have to have right away. Some venues demand that you have that. Some venues only have bicycle rack, and you need to be aware of that. If that's a situation where bicycle rack isn't going to cut it, but if it's a quiet singer-songwriter show, you might be fine with a bicycle rack. That might be okay. But for a metal show, chances are you're gonna need mojo, and you're gonna and security in the barricade, and that's all something, again, depending on the venue, promoter rep's going to see that and let you know that there's an issue. That same thing goes with risers. If they have them on, if it's going to be a cost that they need to rent them, if they have one, but the second one you have to pay for, again, it's all something you have to be aware of. Smoke machine and haze is kind of the same thing. It's just what you need for your show, what you accept, what you don't. They're aware of it. If you don't want haze, you say no smoke machines, but just, again, backdrop, drape, fire curtain. One important note on there is fire certification. That's something you put that in there, because one, you're going to need, make sure you have that, put it in the rider, and also let that way, because that's something that rep is going to notice right away. You're not going to hang that in 90% of cases if you don't have a fire certificate. Backline needs, just letting them know that you do need, because if you do need backline, that's a whole other expense for one thing, but just and a much deeper advance if you have to have them bringing in backline. So that's also an important thing to do. And nothing worse than expecting to see backline and not having it there because you forgot to advance it or it wasn't in the rider. So power needs, as was discussed earlier, is making sure that you have what you need for your show, knowing, getting that feedback from your techs on what you need to advance to make sure that you have the right power, cam locks, or what kind of tails you need to do it. All that kind of stuff is super important if you're carrying any kind of production at all. Then we have house engineering and staffing, just basically this is important from a load in part, making sure you have the right number of stagehands, making sure the people that you have there are what you need. If sometimes you're not carrying a monitor engineer or lighting LD, making sure that you make them aware of that, and that you make them get them notes and make sure that they're aware of what your needs are for the show. Again, crews, same thing, just making sure that you have the right numbers for your load in and load out. Nothing worse than doing your load in and not having enough people, and then also or having too many, and they're standing around and you're paying for that at the end of the night. So just making sure that you're aware of that. The promoter or runner, again, super important, making sure that you have one, making sure what your needs are, what kind of vehicle they have. Are you okay with them having a car? If not, if you need a 15 passenger van. If you're also, an important thing that nowadays is important is who can they carry? So there's I think it's Live Nation has insurance issues at some venues and some cities where they're not allowed to drive bands. So that's a big deal. Nothing worse than having your band sitting in the lobby and you send your runner to go pick them up and they're like, oh, I can only drive crew, I can't drive band. And then, calling your band and saying, I'll take Ubers, the runner can't take you. So making sure you know what the runner can and can't do, what kind of vehicle they have, making sure they speak English if you're in a foreign country, all that, making sure they have room for luggage if you need to be that, making sure that you advance, because it's different if you're coming in from a day off versus you're coming in for a show. They probably have bags with them, so you just have to really make sure in those cases that you're covered for what you need.
I was gonna add, Jim.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Just always put it in the forefront of covering your bottom line. If you don't need a runner and their only duties in the day is going to be shopping, hospitality, and you can save that money on the back end and put it somewhere else, that might cover all your Ubers for the day. If they can't drive your team around or your artists, and you're gonna have to cover that all on a touring expense, that'll save you on the back end, especially with like your minimums around hands and like what you need. All that's being factored in the show. So ensuring that you hit it on the tee is going to save you money at the bottom line, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the next area we have is promoters representative, which is an important part, making sure they speak English, making sure that you can communicate them, making sure they're there from when you load in to load out, so that because they're basically your partner in this show, and that's an important position to make sure that that's there and that you have that person in place. Security is a varying degree. You can see in this case, even though it's a club show, they've taken a lot of details into their needs. The basics are, you want to cover just what you expect for your tour. Are you carrying passes, laminates, and stickies? Do you have pass sheets? Are there any passes that you expect to use of the promoters? Photo passes, who's in charge of that? This day and age, it's also your safety. You're probably going to want to touch base on making sure that somebody's there to cover, active shooters. These days, even with COVID, we probably want to have a conversation about that, even this, and who has access to the backstage and all that stuff. It all depends on tour, but it's also something you want to talk with your managers, talk with your artists, just find out exactly what their expectations are and what their needs are for that, and make sure you communicate that in this first contact that you're having with the promoter. Anybody have anything to add to security? I know it's a pretty wide open thing, but any highlights that you want to cover?
I'd say go back and check out the security episode with Pete Beatle. He had some great advice for smaller tours that are not carrying security, but to consult with someone like him.
This would be your biggest point right here, I think. I mean, obviously cover, but the security meeting, you need to make sure that happens in your day. If all else fails and you didn't get to advance, or you didn't get to meet that guy, the head of security or anything, you just got to make sure that you meet with the promoter and head of security before you open doors, and have that, so you can then cover these things. That's all.
Yeah. Next, we cover audience restrictions. Basically, just what is your policy in photography recording? Does the band allow fans to record shows? Do they not allow anybody to record shows? What's the photography policy? Or do they allow, only point and clicks, no professionals cameras? What are limitations? Again, most of the stuff you would also, it's good to lay it out here, and then you would have that conversation in your security meeting with security also. Again, these days smoking is not a big deal because almost every place is non-smoking, but just if that's an issue, you want to do that. Also, things like what's allowed inside the venue, that can be, bottles, poles, selfie sticks, that kind of stuff, that should, be not be allowed. All drinks in plastic cups. Is it that kind of audience that you want to do? I mean, most shows we just automatically do that, but that's also something, again, that should be touch base on. Ground transport, again, the same kind of runs in with your runner, but if you need more than just what your runner has, a different vehicle than what your runner has, then you would need to arrange that, whether you pay for that or if there's a local, sometimes they won't pay for it, but they have a contact of somebody that, they have a deal with that they can work it out. So again, it's something to do it. Passes, we kind of go through this in security, but just who's responsible for what for passes is everybody on your passes? Do you control it? Is the promoter providing passes, or is their staff covered by their own passes? Again, it's all pass sheets. What do you allow? All that, any restrictions, just who distributes them, et cetera, et cetera. So, and also you start the conversation as to how many they need. If you're supplying passes to them, you kind of start getting numbers together as to what you what they need for their people. Merchandise is, a lot of time, most tours will have a merchandise person, but I think you just set that a little, what you expect, making sure there's a specific area. If you don't have your own area, what that you need somebody to cover it, or if you have your own person, they need to provide an extra seller. You start doing that. Then a lot of times the merch guy will jump into it, but sometimes you have to, at least sometimes in a smaller tour, you might even be counting in and counting out the merchandise. So you might arrange for a good seller to sell it and count in and count out with you, and they take care of it. And at the end of the night, you have to settle after your settlement. Settlement backup ticketing is just setting up ahead of time, basically what you expect from that promoter rep for your settlement. What you want for pre-settlement, what do you want a week prior to the show, what you need for your breakdown, sales, kills, holds, etc. That you want backup, and what you expect, and again, these days, even whether you want hard copies of it or whether you want backup digitally, and if you need cash, etc. You start that up early, because a lot of times there's limitations as to how many days out that they need cash. So you want to get those numbers out as soon as possible. One of the things that Doug just brought up is towels, making sure that you have enough towels, the right kind of towels. That's always, a lot of times bands want dark towels on stage. And so you don't necessarily need dark towels so sometimes you might want a percentage of those to be stage towels for stage. Sometimes they want bath towels on stage. Sometimes they want hand towels. It all depends, knowing your band and communicating that with what you need, because every band's needs and what they like is different, and you got to make sure that you communicate that to the thing. And sometimes in some venues they have to order those out. Most venues these days have it taken care of internally, but sometimes they got to be ordered. Sometimes they got to be sent in for, and so you have to have those numbers ahead of time, to make sure that you got what you need. Dressing rooms, letting them know, again, in this case, you can see there's a little bit of, that you can combine dressing rooms. You got to be flexible, because sometimes you don't know what you're walking into, especially in the club world. They might have one dressing room, they might have 6 dressing rooms. So that's an important one to to get communicated to you, so that making sure everything that you need. If you need mirrors, if you need clothing rails, fans, mirrors, all that stuff, you make sure that you advance ahead of time, because some of those things got to be brought in, and some of the things maybe aren't that important. You can make work in the video, but it's all something that you need to do it. And then to support, sometimes support doesn't get a dressing room, but that's also, being courteous to your support band is also letting them know that ahead of time, saying, hey, sorry, there's one dressing room and we can't help you out on this one. We'll figure out where to put your hospitality. It might have to be in your van or your bus or whatever it is. But just, again, knowing that ahead of time and communicating that, because they're going to be pissed off if they walk into it and they find out that you didn't tell them that. I mean, not that they shouldn't have advanced it also, but
Well, that's a good point to make too. And on this last tour we did a year or so ago, I would just give them a weekly brief on like how, what our venues can accommodate. And so that way they had a clear picture going into each week, being like, okay, we got to make do with this on this day. And that'll create a smooth day for you. You won't have support acts down your throat all day, every day, trying to get information.
Especially on the club level, because
Yeah.
it's tough, you're fighting for showers and just
Yep.
a place to hang out and be for the day,
And a lot of times those dressing room showers is just in one dressing room
Yeah.
in some of these
One
clubs.
shower,
So
yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And making sure that the one with the shower goes to your band, not to the support. And, again, are all things that you need to like check on and be aware of. And showers is an important one, because there are some venues that don't have showers. And so it's important to like, get day rooms in those cases, or let your crew know, saying, maybe you have an option of going, let them know ahead of time, saying, hey guys, sorry, but there's no showers tomorrow, and then figuring out if you have it in the budget, because unless it's in the contract that they need to provide showers, you may not get showers that night. And maybe they can hook you up with a cheap hotel room, but chances are rare, unless it's a venue that has a deal with a hotel and it's known for not having showers, and they're just been called out on enough and that they just take care of it, which doesn't happen very often. You might just be on your own, and that's, again, something important to advance, making that promoter rep know that you expect to have showers, you expect to have, like Dave said, sometimes you only get one, and you get what you get, and do that. And if they don't have showers, then you might have to get a hotel room maybe down the street or a few blocks away, so they can shower. Production office, again, that's hopefully most venues at least have an office, so hopefully you do that. But again, it's making sure that you know that ahead of time, because again, for you, if you don't have one, that means you have to make sure the bus is clear to get one, or there's been times where I know Dave 5-1 has probably had this issue too. And, doing country tours, you're playing a place that they have one room. And so you're setting up in the venue till doors, and you have to do that. So that's something you have to know ahead of time, where you're going to be if you don't have that. And if you do, you need to, making sure these days you don't necessarily have phones that often, but if you do, the numbers that are there, I like to get the internet codes, like a week ahead of time, just so I can post it up in my stuff so people have it. It's in my notes and all that. So just advancing all that stuff, all those little details. And then we get into the production side of things. And again, that's just communicating with your people, making sure that you find out, even if you're not a production person, you go to your people that you have. You go to your front house guy, you go to your monitor guy, you go to your lighting guy, and you say, okay, what do you need to make the show happen? What are your basic requirements? And then you just list it down there. And then the important thing is, then when the promoter rep sends you, well, we don't have this, we have this, that you communicate that back to them so that everybody's on the same page. And then you do that. And that's when you bring in your front house guy and your lighting guy to talk. And then I usually say, like, hands off for me at that point. I put them together. I make sure they work out the details. And then if there's an issue, there's a problem where we need to bring something more in, or we got to make, make a substitution that everybody's on the same page that that's okay or not okay. And then if it's not okay, who's paying for it? And that's when that all conversation starts. But this is where the basic of that conversation is basically just letting everybody know what we expect and what we need. Same thing goes with the
I was gonna add. I was
input
gonna add that
list.
sets the tone for the tour as well. You know, you
Yeah,
communicating,
exactly.
creating that dialogue with your team is going to go a long way, and they know that you're consulting them, and they feel, you know, everyone feels in the same ship here. Everyone's on the same team to make the show go off without a hitch. So, creating that dialogue and addressing things that you don't know. Don't be afraid to consult your team and their
Exactly.
departments to build out a perfect rider that works for them and your tour. And you'll learn along the way. It's important for us to know a little bit about their world as much as, you know, we are doing ours, but I think talking with them about that stuff helps you retain a lot of that info too along the way.
Exactly. And then we get stuff into the like input list and stage plot, which is again stuff you get from your people, but that's just letting that local crew know what your needs are, what you're carrying, what your stage looks like. And again, just continuing that communication. We'll go 5-1 will go more into that and how to make those and how to communicate that stuff in the next section. And next, last but not least, we have catering requirements. This is an important one. It's you know, letting them know when you're what you expect when you get there. Lunch, a lot of times, what kind of lunch. Are you eating from menus? Is it going to be sandwiches? Is it a hot lunch? Is it a cold lunch? All that stuff is important to what your expectations are, and also like what time you expect that. Is it going to be at load in, or is it going to be an hour after load in? It's good to just set that stuff up as soon as you like know and know specifics to have in there what your kind of expectations are. You can, everything can be adjusted, but at least there's an expectation there. When they look at it, they have that initial blueprint of like what they're looking at for when you arrive and what you expect. And again, dinner, a lot of times, you know, there's all the details of are you playing in a restaurant? You go into the restaurant for menus. Is it going to be catered? What do you know, again, like here you say you should be 3 courses where you expect at least what they should be. They can come back and say, well, we don't, this is what we have, or this is what they do. And a lot of times most places will send you a menu, especially when you get more to the theater world. But a lot of times you'll get a menu ahead of time and they'll ask you to pick what you want to eat. And then you can also, and again, this is where you lay out what we talked about earlier, is those people with food issues like gluten-free or lactose intolerance or caffeine intolerant, or if you have vegetarians or vegans, getting them accurate information on what you do ahead of time so that they can get that to the caterers and get accurate numbers for the catering. They say, you know, sometimes there is no catering options. Sometimes it's more expensive for them to cater in because there's 100 restaurants outside the door of the venue, and they're going to do a buyout. But the thing is to remember when you do a buyout, if you want to go down a little bit and look at the dressing room catering for this show, that's about a $700 catering budget. If you're doing a buyout, $450 of that is going into your buyout. That leaves you just a few $100. You know, more than half of that is eaten up in the buyout. And the same thing goes with catering. If you got to watch that number, because that comes out of your catering budget, and then all of a sudden, that's your bus stock, your dressing room, all that stuff comes out of that. So just make sure you're looking at those numbers, because that $700 number that's in your budget covers everything, not just dressing rooms. So that's covering your meals. So everything has to be covering all that stuff. After show bus stock is making sure that, you know, if you're going to need, a lot of these times these days, buses don't need ice, but letting them know ahead of time what you need, how many buses you're going to have, what you need for ice. And a lot of times even I put like what time you want it, if you know ahead of time when you want it, or if you just want it, you know, at showtime left outside your bus, so that you know when you walk out there that you can just pick it up and put it on the bus once the band is on. But just, again, communicating all that stuff. And again,
the best thing you said, Jim, was we can make adjustments, but it's just about setting the expectations.
exactly.
You know, that was the best part of all of that, is setting the expectations that these are the things we're going to look for, but we can adjust accordingly to what's available and what we can actually accomplish. That's great.
Because again, this is the blueprint to the conversation that you're having. You're going to have multiple conversations about all this stuff via email and via phone, but this is the initial conversation you're going to have where they're going to look at it and go, okay, this is the plan for what we're doing. Things are going to change. Things always change. Things change day to day. Things, you know, the show that you have on Monday is probably going to be different than the show that you have on Friday, but this is the basic blueprint to set you up on that conversation that you're having. So, and then you have your dressing room rider, which is pretty straightforward. It's just what your needs are. Most of us look at this and go, well, this is what we need overall, but it's not what we need day to day. We're going to probably call that promoter and go, you know, today we need, you know, instead of 5 cold brews, we need 10 cold brews, but you know what? We don't need the Jameson. We don't need the Prosecco. We don't need this. So basically it's just on a general day-to-day what you're going to need, and you're going to build or subtract based on that. A couple things on there is there's a million ways to do this. Henry's brilliant at doing this, putting pictures on, so real specifics as to if they have questions, they can see.
We're going to actually get into the catering and Henry's amazing rider here shortly.
Yeah, exactly. But also the important little thing, like if you look under it says Jameson, it says important. Making note of those things that somebody else might not think is a big deal, or that's an expensive item. I mean, a bottle of Jameson could be a big chunk of your budget for catering, but if your singer expects that and needs that every day at the show, that's not something you can take off, and you certainly don't want the promoter making a decision that he's going to cut that because it's too expensive, because your singer's not going to go on if he doesn't have that. So making sure to make those little notes of like, some stuff can be cut, some stuff we don't need as much of, but don't touch this. And it's important to make those kind of notes on that. And I can breathe again. I think that covers a club rider.
I told you it's a daunting task to fit all of that into.
That was like running a marathon.
Nice job, Jim. It needed to be done by one of us. Thank you. Okay, take it 5-1.
Okay, well, some of the stuff I'm going to cover, Jim kind of touched on, because there's a lot of us who aren't technically minded, you know, and there are a lot of these club tours where the tour manager is also the lighting director, or is also the front of house engineer, or also the monitoring engineer. So building the technical portion of the rider, I think, is very, very important. And you should lean on the other people that are in your camp to give you that information that is going to be viable, and most important, that you may not know about. Like, I grew up as a front of house engineer. I know nothing about lighting. I know there are those blinky things that go on and off. I can tell you a spotlight model number, have no idea outside of that. So on my tours as production manager, I'll lean on my engineers, front of house engineer, monitor engineer, LD, to let me know what they need or what's important to them. So some of the things that are really helpful to know is, if you're not carrying production, your own consoles, what's in-house. And it's very important to get the venue tech kit, so your engineers will know what they're going to be mixing on and doing lighting on in those particular venues. Also, as you're building your technical rider, what are some of the most important things that your lighting director needs? Does he need this kind of light? Does he need one spotlight? Does he need no spotlights? Does he or she need 2 spotlights? So it's just those small things. And some of the things that I have found, which is great in helping building your stage plot and your input list, is getting the input, no pun intended, from your front of house monitor engineer and your LD. So Another great thing that I have found is if you're traveling with a stage manager, to get some of their feedback, because they're going to let you know how many stage hands you're going to need for the load in, for set changes, especially if you have 2 or 3 acts on the bill with you, and for load out. And as you get on larger tours, if you're traveling with a rigger, your rigger is going to be the person who's really going to help draft up a rigging plot after speaking with your audio and lighting people of what they're going to need to hang in the air. So, but that's moving further down the road. No one is going to think that you're stupid for asking questions, because, like, as we say here on TM101, there's no question that's a stupid question, because if you don't ask, you don't know. So don't feel dumb for asking questions, because it's only another way of learning stuff. So that's it for the technical portion. I'm going to throw it over to Henry for hospitality riders. Take it away, Henry.
Before we do that, so can I ask you a question, 5-1? And I'm going to put you on the spot here, but I think we all know that audio folks, lighting folks, production folks, they like to shoot for their ideal scenario almost every time. Mm-hmm. They want the top of the line desk. They want all the bells and whistles. How do you, let's say you're not the most production savvy and you're early in your career. How do you approach that? Or let's say you have an inkling that maybe you're being asked for too many local hands and it's not going to work in the budget, and you kind of have to approach your tech and say, look, how would you approach that conversation with your team, just to kind of get to the point of what's the minimum you need, or are you being entirely truthful here with me?
I think a lot of it is going to go way, way back to the initial contract and deal sheets that you get, because in your budget, it's going to tell you how much is in your budget for stagehands. So a lot of times they'll have a breakout, like your stagehands are like $25 per hour with a coffee break or a meal break or whatever. So if you're playing clubs and your stage manager is coming up and saying, I need 36 people, I'm going to look at them like they're from another planet, first of all. So, and then plus, the size and scope of what you're going to be traveling with. If you're just pulling a van and a trailer, or a bus and a trailer, or just one semi, you can kind of gauge what you're going to need. And a lot of times it's also going to be based on your load in. How are you going to load into that venue? Are you just flat push through the front door? Are you coming to a loading dock? Are you going to need a forklift? So there's so many different variables, and it's also going to be, like I said, be based on the size and scope of your tour. So, but what I do for engineers, if they want a particular console, I'll always say from the outset, give me your top 3 choices, because that would also help you budget wise. And the same thing with my lighting person. Give me your top 3 choices. Give me like your first 2, which is like your ultimate thing. And then give me something that you can kind of, get by with. You're not going to be super happy with. So we have a happy medium going into all of these different size venues.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. I've had an engineer come onto a tour and say, oh, I mix on X console, period. I'm like, well, okay, this is a bus and trailer tour, so we're going to have a conversation about that. Mm-hmm. It's also budgeted as a bus and trailer tour, so
that engineer is also limiting. Yeah, that engineer is also limiting him or herself by just saying, I only mix on this. Because what if you get into a festival where you can't bring your own consoles and they have a different console? What's that person going to do then? So that's just my, yeah.
It all starts with managing expectations, doesn't it? Let's talk about hospitality, because the hospitality portion of the rider is one of the most important sections, because everyone needs to eat, loves to eat, and everyone has particular preferences and dietary needs. It's no matter if you're a 4-person crew or 150 people, you can't make everybody happy. It's tough. We do our best. And so to get into the hospitality section, one of the first things you can do is simply just ask your artist, band, and crew what types of items they want in their dressing room. When I onboard crew, I have them, we've discussed how we ask everybody to fill out a touring personnel sheet. I like to ask, what's your favorite food? what's your favorite drink? And so then I've got a good gauge. I've already got a list of some things that I know my artist wants, or maybe the crew would want in their bus stock, by finding out their preferences. Now, when you write your list, your hospitality list, don't go for broke. It's the kind of thing where you should look at the deal memos to see what's in the catering budget and have a talk with your artist about what their expectations are. But the best writer is not necessarily the longest list. We're showing you long lists, but I can show you a writer for an act that only asks for water and tea. The artist is sometimes need a lot of things. Sometimes they only need a few things. What you're going for is just what you need on the day. If you were going to put 30 things on or 50 things on a list, that's 50 things you got to chase down every day to make sure are there. So if you can simplify it down to just what you need, it'll make things go a lot easier. Plus, if you are on a TV show or you're a support act, you're going to go into situations where you're going to need to cut this list down. So breaking it down into the most important things and listing them I like to list things from most important to least important on the list. So at least if you start at the top, I'm going to get my top 3, top 5 things for my artist and crew. Now, we do often try to make this part of the writer fun and quirky but in reality, there's a reason for everything. And so everybody knows the famous story of like 1,000 brown M&Ms that Van Halen used to ask for, and all the fun things that other artists have asked for over the years. But these things, although we do like to keep it fun, are really just sort of the red herring that we're looking for, where if the promoter might have missed that small detail, what else did you miss in my advance? What else do I have to go find and look for because you may have missed this or that? And so it's just kind of a thing to keep you on your toes and make sure the details aren't missed. But it's also on tour. It's a fun thing to have that, that picture or that dog show up. It keeps it interesting. Does anybody have any quick examples of fun things that they've thrown into writers that are off the wall and quirky?
I do something as a tool. I have 3 things that I put on my writer which seem weird and not logical, like a latte from Starbucks that on my desk before I show up in the morning, a box of Nerds or Wonka candy, and a Gerber Daisy. Now, a lot of times I'll get calls on that going like, do you really need this? If they ask you if I really need this, no, I don't really need this because I don't care. It's less than $20 for these 3 items. But if I get a call, people laughing, going, hey, what's this for? What are you doing for it? It's a great conversation starter. Also, if I go in to load in that morning and I walk into my desk and there's a latte on it, I know that they're on top of things. I know that I can relax today because pretty much everything, they're looking at all the details. They're aware of what our needs are. Also, if a promoter goes in advance, if he's looking for concessions from me, I can easily cut that because I don't need it. So I'm already cutting something and making a concession for something that I don't care if I have anyways. So I've already won ahead and being like, I can give something if you give something, but I'm giving away something I don't really need. So there's that. And then it's also too, it gets a barometer of if they're bringing that in my dressing room in a timely manner, I see that in more of my production office. I know that it's sometimes a pain in the ass to run back and forth and making sure dressing rooms are good. But if you know they're taking care of you in your room, which is the last thing that needs being taken care of, the dressing rooms are taken care of. I still check on them and do my due diligence, but I know that I don't need to care as much because I know that they're already caring to take care of everything for me. So it's just a barometer on how my day goes and what I need, and kind of it's a tool that I use to help me through my day.
I like that. That's fun. That's a good idea. My signature move for many years for many acts, if they allowed me to do it, was to add a dog to the writer. I would ask for a small to medium breed dog to play with for the day. Somebody local got to bring their dog to the venue and show it some love. It would hang out in the production office. And so anybody on the crew, if you're having a bad day or you just need a minute, go take that dog for a walk. It'll cheer you right up. It's a good thing. It's fun. But not everything that you put on the rider, the promoter is going to give you. There's obvious things that they just won't do. The line keeps moving as the generations go. But back in the day, I used to hear stories of all kinds of things that you could ask for that are considered illegal and maybe not good business to share. But nowadays, a lot of promoters would not buy you things like cigarettes. You don't need those; they're bad for you. Socks, batteries, maybe these little things that you've asked for. They will give. Sometimes they don't, because they don't actually see them as necessary to putting on the show. But a lot of promoters are looking out for your best interests and understand that maybe these guys are asking for socks or boxers every day because it's tough on the road to do laundry. Maybe I could help out the tour, and instead of getting them socks, let's make sure we can get a laundry run or a fluff and fold laundry run for the tour today, and get everybody some clean clothes. Be mindful that the promoter is trying to help you out and build that relationship with that artist and give them what they need, because a lot of things in a writer, the stereotype of the writer is taken out of context. A lot of people think it's a list of diva demands, but really I like to share and push that this is a list of things that every artist and crew would normally have in their homes. These are our 12 comfort creatures that we typically have at home that bring some sensibility and consistency to our lives when everything else is not consistent in the venues. We get to have our little M&Ms or that drink or your favorite food that you eat every day at home, and it just makes you feel real good and warm and fuzzy inside. It's just hospitality. But that's it for some hospitality writer sections. I'm going to send it over to Adrian. Oh, wait, no, who's going on next? Doug? I think we're talking about localizing a writer.
Over
Adrian.
to 5-1. Actually, 5-1's going to talk about when we start carrying your own production a bit, I think. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I just saw the update on our run of show. So I'm going to screen share here in a second, but you've caught me off guard. So when you're
actually, I jumped it. My screen, we're having all kinds of weird screen things today.
Don't worry, that was doing the same thing for me as well.
Right? I'm like,
jumped
hey,
around
what are you
all over
doing?
the place.
It's jumped around. So we are localizing a writer. And I wanted to mention a little bit of something about why writers were so written in such legalese. I owned an agency in the mid-90s, and we were club and theater specific, regionally for local and regional acts and national for touring acts. Because when you're working with club promoters around the country, if you don't create a contract and a document with a writer that comes in legalese, they have zero pressure to provide and perform. On the club level, particularly back in the day, remember, there was not a lot of HOB going on, and there was not a lot of Live Nation club stuff. So everything was independent promoters, particularly in clubs. There was not a lot of organized promotion. And if you didn't have a writer that read like legalese and was part of your legal contract, then you weren't going to get what was asked for. And this was the way to let promoters know that the rider was a binding document, because the rider is part of a binding document. The fact that these days, when we do our advance, we simplify the documents is a product of smarter and more efficient working in the advance process. But the reason that the rider came out as a legal document is because it's a binding part of a binding contract. So just so everybody can, get a little bit of an understanding about how heavy the rider is, it's a part of a contract. So the fact that we make it cute and show, do things like brown M&Ms and Jim's Gerber Daisy, these are part and parcel to make sure that that document is not ignored. Don't you ignore me, Bobby Sue. All right. So localizing.
I'm going to share a, oh wait, here, let me go back real quick and I'll just go ahead and knock out the picture writer. I'll breeze through this. This is a writer that I, for some other acts, you know, a lot of writers are done in just word form. I like to do things just a little differently sometimes. So can you guys see that?
Yep. I love this.
So I like to do photos. So because people love pictures, it's easy to understand. And so I'll go and add photos to everything. I won't touch through all these because I want to go through it quick, but you can easily look at this and see what exactly I'm asking for. Just for the dressing room, I need TV, Wi-Fi, power. I need that security guard posted right there. And then here I go into my drink section. These drinks, those drinks. I got all the brands, the colors, everything is specific to the brand, to the flavor, down to the tea. Right? Love it. Go into alcohol. I'll list it this way so you can kind of see what I need for bottles.
And that makes the runner's job so much easier if the runner's in a supermarket and they're very visual. That's going to save them time, so they're going to really appreciate that. Might make 100%. It easier for them to find it.
Yeah, good point, Doug. I think that's one of the reasons I started doing this, because some people don't know specific brands. Not everybody eats the same thing, so they need to see, like, you know, I need this Sabra brand of hummus. So you like go get just that. If it doesn't match the picture, you know, then don't get it. But you know,
Henry, even
you can add as much details, and so I love doing.
Even if you don't know what something is, but you know what the packaging is, or you can show somebody at the grocery store the packaging of it, and they can lead you to it. There's
Bingo.
So many.
That's happened a lot.
Helpful. Because a lot of times, because how many times would you go, like somebody calls you up from the grocery store going, "What is this? I don't know what this is." You don't know where to look if you don't know what it is. You can see the packaging, and then you can show somebody what it is. Somebody at the grocery store is going to know what that is and lead you in the right direction. So that's brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. And then you can just list off the miscellaneous items that you're looking for that I would want to see on the table. You know, you can get specific or not with them. All these things are on every list. Mirror, wardrobe rack. I'm just giving a visual nature to it. When it gets into furniture, I have changed. So it does take a long time to find all the high-res photos that you need and dropping them into a folder. I've had a lot of great students help me over the years. I can't say that I did all these myself. It's just adding to the bank of photos to be able to add them in. Now, when it comes to dressing rooms, every artist is different. Sometimes they like it dark with hardwoods, maybe more masculine colors. Some artists want it very white and bright and airy. And so this is where you can customize and tell them exactly what furniture you may be looking for, because that vibe does matter to your artist. So it should matter to you. And then here's my my page, my signature move of adding dogs to the writer for many years. Please ask your artists before you do this.
The dog size specification at the bottom does it for me, Henry.
Yeah, so awesome,
cool. Should be cool. Okay,
sorry, you're too big. And I love dogs. I love all dogs. I'm not discriminating, but if you've ever had to play with a Great Dane, he can overpower you very easily. And so it's just easy to have manageable sized dogs. But, you know, so this is a fun way to do riders. It's something I've started doing and has made a lot of sense and helped and answered a lot of questions. But I also do put on the front page, if you caught it, this rider is like 20 pages long. Don't print it if you don't have to. Try to save some paper. But it does come with a checklist at the very end that gives you the Word document. So if you need just a checklist and you don't want to miss anything, you can just print that off. So it's smart. Anyway,
awesome.
Over to you, Doug.
Awesome. So we're going to talk a little bit about localizing the rider right now. You don't want to have just one rider. Everything is not one size fits all, particularly if you're traveling across borders. different things are going to be available in Canada and Europe. So what you want to do is have a realistic advance. Also, if you're doing, and again, we're talking, this is, Rider 101, we're talking clubs and theaters. But as you move along, there will be different types of riders that you're going to have. And we're going to get a little bit into that, different types of riders in just a few moments. But for hospitality, you definitely want to research what's available to you in those areas, because, a lot of times we're really specific about our Topo Chico and our Hava corn chips and the things that we can get from our big box stores or online sellers here in the United States. But perhaps those items aren't going to be available where you're going. You don't want to get yourself into trouble by not being prepared for that. Also measurements, remember that you're converting to metric when you leave the US shores. Power, make sure that there's conversions and you're having those conversations. And we're going to talk to 5-1 a little bit about the technical parts in a second. 5-1, when you are doing power and you're talking about adapting a rider for international travel, how do you address that?
It still goes back to what you're going to need after speaking with your audio, lighting, video people, what they're going to need power-wise, because what we have here in the States doesn't easily translate overseas, because here in the States we're 110 and overseas it's 220. And there are also a couple of countries that are 240 that you also have to consider. So you're going to have to deal with step up and step down transformers as you're traveling internationally. So that's one way to mention it. And the other things that I do is on my rider when we're traveling internationally is to show them what our power is here in the States and ask them to convert it. Or if I have an English person or a European on my crew, ask them, hey, what is 200 volts three-phase? Because I know nothing about power. I would say, what would it be in Europe, or what would it be in Japan? Can you give me the equivalent? And then I'll send that over to the promoter and say, this is what we need audio-wise, this is what we need lighting-wise, this is what we need video-wise, this is what we need rigging-wise power. So, and then dressing rooms, just something that you guys brought up yesterday, which kind of escaped my mind, was having the transformers in the dressing rooms and production office, because there's a lot of times our 110 power is just going to blow up if we just try to plug it into the wall. Because I remember several years ago, I had a printer and I was in my hotel room and I just plugged it in. I was in London, just plugged it into the wall and boom, all the power went off in my room and that blew up our printer. So that's what I do power wise. Back to you, Adrian.
Yeah, you can't make an assumption.
Before you jump in, Doug, I just want to mention that I have blown up my share of printers.
Oh yeah.
Bang! What's that smell? Oh my God, you killed another printer. It's amazing. So yes, that. And back over to you, Doug.
Yeah, I was going to add to that. You basically just make no assumptions regarding electronics of any kind, be it personal, production or otherwise, as to whether they're going to work. Most modern electronics, laptops, iPads, cell phones are dual voltage, but even in the world of electronics, some MIDI keyboards might be, some might not be, some pedals might be, some might not be. So you really need to go through your backline, your artist's personal stuff if they're traveling with things like hair dryers or hair straighteners or anything glam related, anything that's going to go in the venue coming across from one continent to another, you need to look into it and get out in front of it. And
don't forget to carry our adapters also.
Yeah. And typically, if you're coming from North America going to Europe, you're most likely going to be renting backline or freighting your own. But chances are you'll be renting some kind of production in Europe, or if you're vice versa, you're coming from Europe to North America, and you would typically rent.
My bag full of adapters ready to go at any point.
Oh yes. You can rent anything from the small yellow buckets to a full distro system that can cover all your power needs. There are some amazing venues that have both 110 and 240. There are most major festivals will have both, but I wouldn't count on it. And you want to be able to make sure, particularly if you're carrying background and production, that you want to make sure that your stage is just covered so that you don't run into any issues. And I think, sorry, Henry, you're going to make a point.
Sorry, I was just going to.
We can hear.
We lost your audio, Henry.
Oh, how about now? Sorry, my earpiece just died.
Yeah,
okay,
good.
So I was going to add, it kind of goes off of my pictures, but also in your section of production, and when you're bringing production elements with you, something that I learned from 5.1 a long time ago, and I just put together now, where I got that photo idea from was you, dude. Put the picture of our production on the front of the rider. Do you remember that?
I don't, but you know, I'm old, so I easily forget stuff now. But if you have it, share it with me, because I would love to see that.
Oh, sorry, it just cut out for me.
Yeah.
I said, if you still have it, please email it to me, because I would love to see that.
Well, I thought it was genius because you would put pictures of, like, you would take pictures of the actual production in rehearsal or from show number 1, and then add it into the rider. And so every version that you sent out had actual photos of the tour. And it was a huge help for the promoter to see, oh, that's what we're building. That's what the show's going to look like. Otherwise, you can't tell from reading all these words. And I thought it was genius. And
I do remember
over
that
the
now.
years, as I have shipped production elements overseas, I'll take a picture of it and be like, I'm shipping this to you. This is going to come through your loading dock. And so it's very clear about like what we're bringing. And so I just realized that little thing that you used to do spiraled into my crazy picture writer. So
well, I've got one more to add to you. Joe Gallagher and Chris Musgrave shared a little tip with me, is to videotape your load in.
Oh yeah.
Basically do almost a time lapse of your load in and your load out, because in that way you can save that file, put it in Dropbox and send it to your promoters also. And they can see, oh, this is what's coming off. They can visually see what's coming off the truck and going back in, and they can see how your day rolls. So I thought that was a brilliant idea from Chris Musgrave and Joe Gallagher over at Gallagher Staging.
That's a great idea. Yeah. And another reason why the picture writer, I've never done that, but I loved it. And I'm going to look into doing it now. It's going to be a lot of work on the front end, but you know what's a lot of work on a tour, mid-tour, is poorly worded writers, lack of clarity, creating email threads that are 15 emails long for each show. And that adds up over 10 shows because you put 2 bags of Tostitos and somebody in Europe where Tostitos aren't a thing goes, hey, what's that? And because they're doing their job properly, they're going to check in with you and say, hey, does Doritos work for you? Whereas if you worded that correctly, that's a conversation that didn't need to happen. So, it's going to cost you work on the front end. But as we've said many, many times, do that work when you have the time to do it before the tour, rather than in the middle of the tour when somebody's doing a shop at 11 p.m. the night before your show or something along those lines. And the last thing I would add in terms of localizing a writer, this is not for everyone. In fact, it's only something that's come up once in my career, but touring is a huge broad spectrum and is not just localized to US and UK and European rock and roll touring. If you do a lot of touring in one foreign market, it can be a good idea to have your writer translated. Again, this is only going to apply for a handful of people, but there are US artists who are huge in France and only France, and they will go there for a couple months and do a ton of touring in France. My artist does a ton of touring in regional Quebec, where surprisingly to some people, English is not very widely spoken. So doing shows in regional theaters where we're still carrying a ton of production, it's still big shows, nobody speaks English. So I have taken my writer and translated it with my team into French. And that goes a long way to assuaging issues that we ran into the first time I sent out my English writer. So you kind of have to be on top of it though, because as things are being updated, you need to be able to update the writer in the new language as well. There's no point having a translated out of date writer, but can be useful. And with that, I will pass over to 5-1.
Thanks, Doug. So we're going to go into when you get on a larger type tour, how it actually becomes easier for you, which is one of my favorite sections. I'm actually going to share a rider here. Since we've all had technical difficulties today, I'm going to break the curse. So was I successful? Word up. Okay, so I have included, this is a writer that MJ shared with us yesterday, and I revised the names. So your tour manager changed the names to Bossy Pants and email blah, blah, blah at leavemealone.com. Your production manager's name is I Know It All. Where's the production office at y.com. And your production coordinator, who's actually the real leader of the tour, towels are here at stopaskingme.com. So I just changed the names and the titles. So back to what you're going to be carrying if you're on a arena
5-1,
tour.
that's awesome. I can't stand it. That's great.
Bored.
Thank you.
Thank you, though.
Yes,
So,
your boredom is our entertainment.
so, so it becomes more about laying out what the venue and promoter need to provide and what you're going to be bringing. So I have added a section, and I've seen this in a lot of riders. You'll break out a section of what the tour is bringing. So like here, your parking, how many trucks and buses you're going to be bringing. And a lot of times, if you have support acts, I will also add like what the support acts are bringing. So the one sprinter van with a trailer, just so that they will know parking wise. And also, if you're coming to a loading dock, you'll know that the sprinter van can't back up to a loading dock. So you have to have another way and means of also getting them. So, and the easier stuff is to mark out your call times, what you're going to need the promoter and the venue to provide. So this is just a generic schedule. And then back to some of the stuff that Adrienne, Henry, and Jim shared is showers, towels, and Doug, back, we don't need the 96 towels. We're only going to need 40 for here and 60. And also labeling your black stage towels, or as I prefer to call them, African-American stage towels moving forward. And then back to what you're going to need power-wise. And this all comes back to our earlier conversation of getting these details from your audio, lighting, and video people, because I don't know anything about power. Tell me what you need. I'll put it in the rider and advance it. Front of house mix position, how many spotlights that you're going to need, seating plan, if you're playing a venue that's a GA or a seated venue, local transportation, back to catering and hospitality, your meal times, and how many people that you're going to have on the tour is very important for a promoter in the venue to know. Your wish list of your backstage rooms of what you would like to have. A lot of times, some of these venues don't have this. So once you get the venue tech kit, you can always find out how many dressing rooms they have, and then you can kind of readjust. You can kind of combine some of these rooms. And then per Henry, providing your catering rider and some of the things that you need, and then back again with your meal times. And now we have the ancillary stuff, you have one person who's dairy intolerant, one person who's soy intolerant, one person who's vegetarian. You might want to also add if someone's vegan or if they have any peanut or other type of allergies, which is always good to know. And just a general breakdown of some of the stuff that you would like to see for breakfast, lunch, dinner.
I cut and paste that section more than anything out of other people.
And for your stage coolers, which is also another great thing. And now I'm seeing more and more these days on every size tour having a stage cooler for front of house, because those guys really can't leave to run backstage to catering, or they'll have one of their techs run and grab some drinks. But now we just add an extra cooler to send out to them.
Always, guys, I just want to add a note in about timing for your coolers. Put a time in there so that your
idea.
caterers don't, so they know what time you want those coolers. And if you want them maintained, if you're doing a summer shed tour, you're going to want coolers around in the morning for load in, and you're going to want them tended to a couple of times a day. And then you might have show coolers that come out in the evening that have beverages for your talent. And you want to re-up your cool beverages, crew beverages, and front of house beverages get a re-up too. So timing for your coolers to your catering folks is going to be crucial. They can't intuit that stuff. You got to give them the info.
Yep, great idea, Adrian.
Yeah, and for anyone that's kind of wondering, we have covered green touring twice in previous episodes and looked at more sustainable touring and rider practices in depth in the past. So you can find those on YouTube. We haven't really covered those today, but there are a myriad of ways of being more sustainable in building a rider.
Yep. Well, that's it for my section, and I'm going to throw it to the notorious JIM. On to you, Jim.
Thank you, my friend. One thing you're going to deal with early on, well, at all aspects of touring, but especially in the early days, is TV, and you'll need a rider for this. Generally, it's going to be just a specific technical rider. It's going to be, because you're going to take your typical stage plot and your typical
Input list.
Thank you, Henry. Input list, but you don't need it you're going to need it for one or two songs. So you want to make it specifically for those songs. And then you're going to want to put how many people you have. But mostly you're going to do what they tell you. You're going to do what they tell you on what they send you for their rider. So, but the most important part is just going to your text, going to your band, finding out specific song, making sure that you have everything there that you need for that song, and then getting as much information as you can on what you're taking with you, how many people you'll have, and then asking all the the questions as to what you need from, or what you can and can't, or won't, or will and won't get from them. Anybody else have anything to add to that?
Well, don't make the rookie move and advance the Ellen show asking for a buyout. The TV show don't stuff like that doesn't apply. And I mean you got to consider the time that you're going to be there. Sometimes you're just there for a few hours, so you don't need a full catered meal. Your artist is just gonna pop in, do the show, and go. Maybe you're doing the Today Show or Good Morning America. You load in at like 1-2 a.m. for that, and then work through the morning. So you need to think about what your crew is going through. They need to try to find something to eat at midnight before they go to work, and then at 6 a.m. just before show, there needs to be something for everybody to be able to get through. So just planning ahead. You're right. And for TV, cut it down to make your list as small as possible. You will look like a hero if you give them a really small list. Because they're going to give you stuff anyways. Yeah. So just make it the things that your artist definitely wants. And
Yeah, I mean, I think you asking for stuff that your writer, your artist specifically needs, like Henry said, that you need there, and they'll come back to you if they can't provide that. But at least generally they'll try to take care of your artist. They're not going to cover your writer. They're probably not going to feed you. You're probably not going to get anything except what they decide to put in that room. But if there's something specific you need, they will get in transportation. Generally, they will cover your band, but crew transportation is not covered. But it doesn't hurt to ask for that stuff. The worst they'll come back to and say, we don't cover that. And a lot of times they will even have vendors that they can help you with to get what you need, or they'll always tell you where to go. That's the easiest or best thing to make your day easier.
You made a good point
I'd say,
about specific to the song, because for example, like the band, the Plain White Tees, they're like a 4 or 5 piece band, but their hit song years ago, Hey There Delilah, was just the lead singer on an acoustic guitar. So every time they would perform that song, essentially the rest of the band and the full backline gear wasn't needed for that specific TV performance.
Yeah, or if you have a keyboard player and the keyboard, somebody plays keyboard, but that song doesn't have keyboards in it, you're not going to put the input list with the keyboard on it. You're going to just do specifically what you need for that song. Yeah.
I would say speak to the publicist. If you're unsure about what you're going to be walking into and what's going to be provided, the publicist or the label, whoever's come to you to open the conversation about logistics, is the person to ask. They'll have done that TV show 100 times. They'll know the people involved. They'll know where you can push to get a few things extra and where you absolutely shouldn't. So speak to the publicist.
All right, anything else? Mark, questions?
That's it.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I was running through looking to see if there was any questions. I know we wanted to get one off the bat from Charmil Walters, and a handful of students have asked, will these writers be added to the resource section of the website? We have agreed to, yes, I believe we are going to add these writers.
Sure.
So they will be available.
Good, more to steal. I can't wait.
Absolutely. I mean,
why break tradition, right? Why break tradition?
That's right.
All we've ever done is steal each other's appropriate each other's documents. I'm definitely working off a flow sheet that's 15 years old from somebody else.
Exactly.
Another question is from Sebastian.
Shamelessly.
Sebastian Vidalis, could you further address the deal memo item? I know we'll all kind of have our own little things to discuss about deal memo, but early in the tour, when those discussions are going on between the agent and the promoters, when they're putting out the bids and going through that process, they need something to work with. The deal memo is going to kind of just be a brief overview. You'll see this kind of get changed up a bit as things start to come to fruition and seal, like all the deals are set in stone. The deal memo is just going to be a brief scope over what the show is going to look like between both parties, what was agreed upon. But that will adjust a little bit as you get more realistic with what your production is going to be, how big your teams are going to be, and start to kind of navigate that. I think I nailed that a little bit. Good. Unless anyone else wants to add.
Yep, I think you did. And regarding the question about award show writers, so take everything that Jim just said about television and make it even smaller, because what happens on award shows is you are not alone. You are in a cavalcade of top talent. So nobody is more important than another person on an award show. My advice is to get with your talent liaisons on that award show. And it's all going to depend if this is a band, do you have 75 dancers? Award shows are a whole nother story. What I would do is I would speak with my talent liaison and say, what is it that we can expect you to provide? I have some hot items for my talent, my principal that I really need. we all come into this knowing that not all resources are available at an award show. So the best thing to do is make contact with your point of contact for talent, ask them what they're going to be able to provide, and somehow come to a situation where you know what you've got to do for your people, what you may have to bring in, and what the show is going to provide to you. And just remember it's just a moment in your day. It's going to be annoying. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be everything you're not used to. You're thinking outside the box all day. That's an award show. That's your award show writer. Forget everything you know and just go in there, being as gracious as you can and figure out what they're going to be able to provide and start there.
I think we have some of our students have mentioned from our YouTube feed asking if we can retry the MJ tip.
I'll do it right now. Stand by. Here we go. Share sound. It's on. Share. Here we go.
Hi, all. So I've recently taken a position as a production accountant on some very large scale events. Never fear, I'm still part of TM 101, though you might not see me on camera as much in the next few months. I'll still be working hard behind the scenes to produce our episodes, and I'll be on Clubhouse and other content we produce. I'll also be presenting a new feature we call Quick Tips. So here we go. Quick Tips are one-sentence tips and/or tricks that you can research further, think about in your studies, or use as discussion points with your mentors and peers. I'll drop one in each week at the top of each episode. Today's quick tip is, don't be afraid to take on new challenges and new roles, even if it's not what your ultimate goal is, because that's where growth comes from. Take it away, Henry.
Thanks, MJ.
That was awesome.
That was great.
So good.
Let's answer Tammy Martin real quick. When do you send the writer? Tammy, generally the writer is sent by the agent when conversations about booking the shows are happening so that they can see what the show entails and what they're bidding for. Then there's hopefully going to be a writer that's sent when the contracts are sent. And then when the production and tour management teams start advancing, we send the very latest with a date to make sure that everything that we're advancing off of is the single most current. And again, reminding everybody that from the time that first rider is sent, when that date is being discussed, to the time when the date actually plays, you may have, adjusted that rider in so many ways. So you do, and an experienced promoter rep is going to make sure with you when you're advancing that you've got the same, that you've got a current version of the rider. Also, hospitality wise, I break out my hospitality rider and send it separately to those people. And when I'm advancing hospitality, I make sure that, again, the hospitality rider is the most current because that seems to change the most. And on the day, for my newbies and production coordinators and folks who have not toured before, print out that hospitality rider and make sure that the person who is fulfilling the rider on the day has been given the correct rider to work off of to fill, because so many times you'll come in and you'll see outdated items on yours on the table or in the area, and what's happened is the person that you advanced with is not the person that's servicing the day, and the person that you advanced with did not send the updated version of the rider to the person servicing the day. So do yourself a favor, have all your little ducks in a row, dot your I's, cross your T's, and that way you can avoid other people's mistakes in that manner.
Yeah, I would like to add to that as well. Always do your due diligence to check in with your agent, and because they're gonna be staying on top of sending out the rider that is current and or a little bit outdated. You may be coming into your next tour with this client. Make sure to check in with them, because when they're building these deal memos out in advance, your tour may have grown significantly by that point. That's going to help your deal memos expand with your growth. So that way you're not undercutting yourself as y'all's movements continue.
That's a very big point, Mark. Actually, if the deal memos were based on an old rider on a smaller, when the act was smaller and they've since exploded, then the budget's going to be way off, because they are not taking into account that this act is grown. They're going to bring production. So if you are with an act that is growing very rapidly, make sure that your agent has that updated rider showing that, hey, we're going to start bringing another bus. We're going to start bringing a truck or two. Those things will just kill your budget if they thought you were still a van and trailer act or one bus, one trailer. It's way different.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that kind of covers it. I think we've
Got all the
seen all
questions?
I'm looking through the chat. I think, does anyone have any last minute questions? I'm looking at the chat thread. It looks like we're
I say it every time, but this is one of my favorite episodes. I really enjoy talking about this stuff. And as you can see, I put in so much time into my picture writers. I just love sharing it and collaborating with everybody. So if you have any tips and tricks, send it to us, share it. We will share some of these writers as soon as we can. And Mark, you want to close us out?
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone, for spending time with us this Monday. I know everyone's kind of lives are adjusting, and so we're thankful for everyone who's been with us from the beginning and who's continuing to make TM101 a part of their routine. Like always, if you can't make the episodes on Monday, or you have friends that were like, "Man, I missed it," please send our YouTube channel their way to join and follow that. That's an easy way for them to get back up to speed and check out any episodes that we've recorded here live on Zoom. And like always, we'll be back on Mondays. We've got our Clubhouse episodes on Wednesday, but like always, keep track of our socials. We'll announce things that are coming up and what the episodes are going to be and all that good stuff. So everyone have a wonderful week, and we will see you next week.
What is next week, you guys?
Just
Isn't that a conversation?
Without MJ, we don't know.
It's a conversation with Malcolm Weldon.
Yes.
Oh,
This is something everybody should be around for. A conversation with production manager Malcolm Weldon.
Dude, that's gonna be huge.
Yeah, this is going to be a great discussion. So for those of you who are not familiar with Mr. Weldon, you can see him behind amazing acts such as Pink, Cher, Sade, Tina Turner. The list goes on.
Wow.
Aerosmith.
The Eagles. Yeah. Van Halen.
I can make it then. I'm going on tour as soon as we wrap up this call. So hopefully I'll see you guys next week.
Henry's got to go to the airport. Get it.
Henry's
Go to
flying
work.
London, so
Get to work. Read the day sheet.
safe travels, Henry. Everyone have a wonderful week.
Everybody.